The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this fifth webinar on the Secret Teachings of All Ages by Manly P. Hall. This and all subsequent webinars will be available on makara.us. Just click on the MF or Moria Federation Webinars heading. It's circled up there in white. And you'll find the Secret Teachings link under its own subheading as indicated by that red arrow. Last month, we took a look at the European Enlightenment and the German idealists, both of which put forth key concepts found in the Ageless Wisdom, such as Hegel's idea that God is, quote, a process of unfolding that never attains to the condition of unfoldment, and von Schelling's idea that infinite and eternal mind is the all-pervading cause of existence. Let's now take a look at the French school, whose great champion was René Descartes. Could we get a reader for this paragraph, please?
Martha, can you read that for us, please? Okay, let's go with, okay, there we go. Thank you. Go ahead, please, Lynn.
René Descartes stands at the head of the French School of Philosophy and shares with Sir Francis Bacon the honor of founding the systems of modern science and philosophy. As Bacon based his conclusions upon observation of external things, so Descartes founded his metaphysical philosophy upon observation of internal things. Cartesianism, the philosophy of Descartes, first eliminates all things and then replaces as fundamental those premises without which existence is impossible. Descartes defined an idea as that which fills the mind when we conceive a thing. The truth of an idea must be determined by the criteria of clarity and distinctness. Hence, Descartes held that a clear and distinct idea must be true. Descartes has the distinction also of evolving his own philosophy without recourse to authority. Consequently, his conclusions are built up from the simplest of premises and grow in complexity as the structure of his philosophy takes form.
Thanks, Lynn. So any thoughts or questions on this description of Descartes? It's Cartesian, by the way, or Cartesianism. It just means derived from the philosophy of Descartes. So like Leibniz, Descartes was a scientist and philosopher. These guys were amazing. He developed analytical geometry, as well as writing numerous books on philosophy. In his Cartesian dualism, he sets out to demonstrate the distinction between the human soul and human body. As part of this distinction, Descartes posits that the mind is composed of a non-physical, non-spatial substance, thus identifying mind, with a capital M, with consciousness and self-awareness, in contradistinction to the brain, which he recognized as the seat of the intellect. You can see the influence of the ageless wisdom working through his intuition going on here, right? This is the underlying basis for his famous statement, cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. Thinking, as here used, being a demonstration of self-awareness. Okay, we'll skip the materialist, Auguste Comte, and the isms in the following paragraph to read about Henri Bergson, an elder contemporary of MPH's. He was I think nearing the end of his life during Manly Hall's youth, who said, "To exist is to change. To change is to mature. To mature is to go on creating oneself endlessly. thus echoing Hegel's idea of endless unfoldment. Could we get a reader on this for this paragraph on Henri Bergson?
Karen, can you read that for us, please?
Sure. Henri Bergson, the intuitionalist, undoubtedly the greatest living French philosopher, presents a theory of mystic anti-intellectualism founded upon the premise of creative evolution. His rapid rise to popularity is due to his appeal to the finer sentiments in human nature, which rebel against the hopelessness and helplessness of materialistic science and realistic philosophy. Bergson sees God as life continually struggling against the limitations of matter. He even conceives the possible victory of life over matter, and in time the annihilation of death.
So again, you see the ageless wisdom coming through. Any thoughts or questions about this paragraph? Wouldn't you like to be remembered as an intuitionalist? I love that description. We see Bergson's recognition of the duality of spirit and matter in his statement, God is life, continually struggling against the limitations of matter. The profundity of his philosophical understanding is revealed in his statement, the present contains nothing more than the past, and what is found in the effect was already in the cause. A simple analysis might give us a statement like, the present is the effect of the past, which already contained within it the hidden cause of the present. But we have to wonder if Bergson wasn't also inferring or aware of the idea that there are causal levels that stand outside the influence of linear time that are continually informing all that functions within linear time. Okay, let's take a moment to look at the illustration in the center of page 19.
Francis?
Yeah.
I like the comment about creative evolution. There's this dichotomy going on. There's this conflict going on between material and religion, between science and religion, creationism versus evolution. Why not both?
Yeah, they have to reconcile. In truth, the material is an effect of the unseen realms. And so they do reconcile. And any science that suggests that they don't is missing some link, usually in the unseen understanding or the awareness of causal levels.
And religion, on the other hand, is missing the evolutionary nature of creation.
Yeah, well, certainly in the more fundamentalist religions are, well, to be kind, don't include those scientific realities, Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Okay, so let's take a look at this illustration. Okay, can we get a reader for this? Hone's Ancient Mysteries Described.
Carrie, can you read that for us, please?
Yes. In an effort to set forth in an appropriate figure of the Christian doctrine of the Trinity, it is necessary to devise an image in which the three persons, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, were separate and yet one. In different parts of Europe may be seen figures similar to the above, wherein three faces are united in one head. This is a legitimate method, for to those able to realize the sacred significance of the threefold head, a great mystery is revealed. However, in the presence of such applications of symbology in Christian art, it is scarcely proper to consider the philosophers of other faiths as benighted if, like the Hindus, they have a three-faced Brahma, or like the Romans, a two-faced Janus.
Thank you, Carrie. So any thoughts or questions about this idea? Here's the Hindu Trimurti in the Elephanta caves in India that MPH cites, and the Roman Janus, illustrating the multiple aspects of deity through multiple heads, arms, and symbolic accoutrement, is common in Hindu and Buddhist art, though it is less often found in Christian iconography. Only the most unphilosophical could believe that this image of Avalokiteshvara, for example, is a literal representation of the appearance of this deity. And yet this lack of basic understanding, this material polarization was and still is largely responsible for the zeal of Christian missionary efforts in the East. Okay, we'll now turn to the last page of the introduction, only to skip the next few paragraphs, which describe mostly materialistic philosophers such as John Locke and Darwin, and move down to the paragraph on Herbert Spencer. So could we get a reader for this paragraph, please?
Frida, can you read that for us, please?
Sure. Hear me?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Dr. W. J. Durant declares that Herbert Spencer's great work, First Principles, made him almost at once the most famous philosopher of his time. Spencerianism is a philosophic positivism which describes evolution as an ever-increasing complexity with equilibrium as its highest possible state. According to Spencer, life is a continuous process from homogeneity to heterogeneity and back from heterogeneity to homogeneity. Life also involves the continual adjustment of internal relations to external relations. Most famous of all Spencer's aphorisms is his definition of deity. God is infinite intelligence, infinitely diversified through infinite time and infinite space, manifesting through infinitude of ever-evolving individualities. The universality of the law of evolution was emphasized by Spencer, who applied it not only to the form, but also to the intelligence behind the form. In every manifestation of being, he recognized the fundamental tendency of unfoldment from simplicity to complexity, observing that when the point of equilibrium is reached, it is always followed by the process of dissolution. According to Spencer, however, disintegration took place, only that reintegration might follow upon a higher level of being.
Thoughts or questions about this? Again, we see, the ancient wisdom definitely influencing the development of Spencer's doctrines, right? During his lifetime, Spencer was considered to be the leading European intellectual of the 19th century. It's interesting to compare Spencer's statement, evolution is an ever-increasing complexity with equilibrium as its highest possible state, with von Schelling's third and final level of self-development. Reason is the neutral point wherein the two former movements are blended. You see the connection there? This idea of equilibrium is definitely indicated in von Schelling's thoughts. And then finally, with this statement on equilibrium from Initiation, Human, and Solar. Can we get a reader for this DK statement?
Yes. Scott, can you please read that for us?
Yes. it is possible to reach a point where naught that occurs can ruffle the inner calm, where the peace that passeth understanding is known and experienced, because the consciousness is centered in the ego, who is peace itself, being the circle of the Buddhic life, where poise itself is known and felt, and equilibrium reigns, because the center of the life is in the ego, who is in essence balance, where calm rules unruffled and unshaken, because the divine knower holds the reins of government and permits no disturbance from the lower self, where bliss itself is reached that is based not on circumstances in the three worlds, but on that inner realization of existence apart from the not-self, an existence that persists when time and space and all that is contained therein are not. That is known when all the illusions of the lower planes are experienced, passed through, transmuted, and transcended. That endures when the little world of human endeavor has dissipated and gone, being seen as naught. And that is based on the knowledge that I am that.
Thanks, Scott. So why is it equilibrium instead of like the the highest point? Reaching. Why isn't it? Why isn't this all experienced when you reach the highest point? Why is it this place between this equilibrium, this place of equilibrium? Anybody have any thoughts about that? I think it has something, first of all, if you look, yeah.
Sorry, Martha has her hand up and Scott has his hand up.
Good.
Go ahead, Martha.
Thank you. So without giving an answer, I just visualize that it's a little bit like the tension that we speak about when we're living that we require opposites in order to synergize, but then there comes a place at transcendence that passes through transmutation and transformation, and this equilibrium is a balance, but it's equipoised so that it's infinitely alive. So it occurred to me that he was thinking of equilibrium not as reconciliation as much as the synergy of tensions.
Very nicely said, Martha. Yeah. I think it starts as a relief of tension of the pairs, but I like your word equipoise, which it suggests the state that one is in when equilibrium reigns, right? And I think it's very much connected with his last three words here. And this is all based on the knowledge that I am that, right? It's the second phase of the Leo keywords, I am, and then I am that, and then I am that I am, or am I, right? Which suggests, in this case, he tells us here, it's the consciousness centered in the ego, which is peace itself, equipoise. That's takeaway. Thank you, Martha. Scott.
Yes. What comes to mind here is, the first picture that came to mind is the astrological one. We're talking in terms of equilibrium as balance, and we associate that with Libra, which is, in a sense, the opposite of Aries, the opposite of the unity of Aries that comes once again to a different kind of unity when it comes to Libra. The two of them are opposite. They're both balanced and equal. And it's a full moon relationship. It's gone halfway around, fully lighted. The soul here now is in form and in control at this point of equilibrium in Libra, or you're making that choice anyway. So And the I am that, of course, is being the second aspect of Leo, is that identification of the personality with the soul, or the soul taking control.
Yeah.
I don't know, just the Libra aspect of it stands out, and that clarity that happens only two places in the zodiac, one at the beginning and one at the halfway point.
Yeah, it's like the new moon and the full moon, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And at both places they are at unity, different unities. I also think always of the parabola of this coming into form and leaving it at that fourth point. That's a balance point, that opposite of unity, where we are anyway. And this round of humanity, this round of the planet.
Yeah.
Full moon position.
Right. It's
yeah.
Go ahead. I
was going to say it's different in that this is I don't know, I think of it as sort of more of a vertical one going into the fourth sphere and so forth. Aries Libra, I think of it as horizontally. But at any rate, there's a full moon realization there, and perfection, relative perfection.
Relative perfection, indeed. Because with Libra, and I think with any equilibrium, it's a time of a change of direction, when which then, for instance, in Libra, it's that place of, I love Martha's word, equipoise, before one begins to pass on the zodiac as we pass through the signs in actual time, right? We reverse our passage through the signs of the zodiac, and that is brought about, or that equilibrized point is in Libra. So it also heralds the coming of a new direction, right?
Yes.
But in the meantime, there is this equipoise, this place of peace.
Which is in itself a trinity too, remembering that Libra is not actually a duality, but a trinity. It's the third point that gives you the equipoise, the equilibrium. It takes the opposite and makes a triangle of it. It goes from 2 to 3, and in that trinity is 1.
Yeah. And anyone who is hoping to escape the pairs of opposites must seek that point that defines both those pairs, or both points of tension that make up that pair of opposites. You have to find that in that which has them both in common, right? The common point. I couldn't have said that more poorly, but I hope you all get what I mean. It's the top point of the equilateral triangle, and this is very much the purpose of working towards the second initiation, that great gulf between the first and second initiation, where we're presented with all the pairs of opposites, both on the astral and mental plane. DK makes a very pointed reference to the fact that we also have to deal with the illusions of the mental pair of opposites as well, right? In order to finally take that significant second initiation, where we have a vision of the unity. We see this just in the axes of the 6 signs of the zodiac. How, for instance, Leo and Aquarius and Gemini and Sag are of an essential singular energy, demonstrating in 2 ways, right? But that an understanding of the energy that then manifests in those 2 ways, the understanding of that more primal energy, is a truer understanding of both the signs, right? Or as you say, with Aries and Libra. Yeah. Well, thanks, Scott. Anything else on that?
Yes, we have Lynn Gitter has a comment, and then Carrie has his hand up. So Lynn says Libra in the dividing line between the lower personality and the higher soul in the astrology chart.
You know, it's interesting too, the symbol of Libra actually illustrates that. You know, you have that lower line, and then the second line has that part of a circle in it, you know, at the center of it, suggesting a shift in consciousness. And one other comment, did you say?
Yes, Carrie's got his hand up. Go ahead, please, Carrie.
Just picking up on Scott's point of Aries, and relating it back to Spencer's, the ever-increasing complexity, if we go towards Libra in both directions, so let's say the unevolved man and the evolved man, whatever you want to call it, there is an ever-increasing complexity between the relationship between the evolved man and the unevolved man, moving towards the possible equilibrium. I just saw it going in two directions, towards from Aries to Libra.
That's interesting. Yeah. So the passage from Aries to Libra, and then the passage from Libra to Aries, and then, you know, that becomes fourfold when you look at the two directions that you can pass through the zodiac, right? Because you have then the reversed position of moving from Libra back to Aries, compared to the unreversed, or the personality position of moving from Libra to Aries, which would be, you know, via Virgo, right? And they would be quite different. There's a book there somewhere, or all four directions, you know, on each of the signs. That would reveal a lot. Thank you, Carrie. Anyone else? This is a beautiful quote, isn't it? It's just the essence of DK's. I don't know. He's able to transmit the sense of the peace of the ego, you know, and of this equipoise in such a beautiful way in this paragraph. Okay, back to Spencer. His statement, life is a continuous process from homogeneity to heterogeneity, and back from heterogeneity to homogeneity, is consistent with the theosophical teachings on the nature of evolution and evolution. I think, you know, many of these philosophers picked up through their intuitions some of the basics of the occult sciences and transferred them into Western philosophy, which is useful. It's a service because they reach people that would not otherwise be reached with these ideas. The secret doctrine describes mula prakriti as undifferentiated substance, the form aspect at its most subtle and homogeneous, or homogeneous, I should say. As evolution progresses, heterogeneity or diversity develops. Evolution can be seen as a progressive expansion back to the unity of homogeneity. I am that I am, but with the added element of self-awareness. His next statement, life also involves the continual adjustment of internal relations to external relations, aptly describes soul alignment, which leads to group identification. That's, you know, you could describe that as the adjustment from personality centeredness to group centeredness. And the ultimate adjustment to external relations, and thus to effective service. Because when you're fully adjusted, if you've fully made the adjustment of the internal to the external, you are then able to serve most effectively. But it is in his definition of deity that Spencer reveals his innate occultism. God is infinite intelligence, infinitely diversified through infinite time and infinite space, manifesting through an infinitude of ever-evolving individualities. As Joseph Campbell said in his series, The Power of the Myth, infinity is not a long time because infinity has nothing to do with time. To better understand this idea, let's take a look at a quote from The Secret Doctrine. The boundless can have no relation to the bounded and the conditioned. The immutably infinite and the absolutely boundless can neither will, think, nor act. To do this, it has to become finite and thus ruled by time. And it does so by its ray penetrating into the mundane egg, infinite space, and emanating from it as a finite God. By the way, for more Secret Doctrine, join the other webinar series. It's wonderful stuff. So infinity stands in a causal relation to all finite cycles. As Campbell says, it's not a long time, right? No matter how long those finite cycles may be. Okay, back to Spencer. So given this quote from the SD, we see that Spencer's description of infinite intelligence, diversity, time, and space is actually descriptive of the causal condition of beingness, which stands always in a noumenal relationship to what we know as intelligence, time, and space. And each of his references to infinity is describing that causal relationship. Any thoughts or questions about any of these ideas? I think he was obviously, Hall was very excited about Spencer's work, and I think he intuited the ageless wisdom. Okay, I'm including the next philosopher, Giordano Bruno, not so much for his esoteric perspective, but to illustrate the inherent danger of being a philosopher who opposed church doctrine in 17th century Italy. Can we get a reader for this paragraph on poor Bruno?
Martha, can you're muted, you're self-muted.
You were going to call on me.
Yeah, there you go.
Giordano Bruno was also considered one of the first lawyers, that he contributed greatly to the body of law, which I'm sure didn't do him any good. The chief position in the Italian school of philosophy should be awarded to Giordano Bruno, who, after enthusiastically accepting Copernicus' theory that the sun is the center of the solar system, declared the sun to be a star and all the stars to be suns. In Bruno's time, the earth was regarded as the center of all creation. Consequently, when he thus relegated the world and man to an obscure corner in space, the effect was cataclysmic. For the heresy of affirming a multiplicity of universes and conceiving cosmos to be so vast that no single creed could fill it, Bruno paid the forfeit of his life.
Yeah, can you imagine, you come up with this extraordinary discovery and you're arrested, basically. Right? That was the time of the Inquisition, which really affected the development of esoteric philosophy in Europe, anyway. Okay, we'll skip over the rest of the Italian school and move down to MPH's brief description of Ralph Waldo Emerson.
Hold on.
Yeah, Michael.
Because Anne Veronica has written something.
Okay.
I do not know if what I am writing down makes sense, but I will write it down anyway. The upper symbol of Libra is an omega in the Greek alphabet, the last letter. Also, I was thinking when you put an energy in a system, Aries the beginning, entropy comes in. It takes time to assimilate the energy and come back to a higher equilibrium, Libra. What I haven't connected yet is the intermediate stages with the astrological signs, Taurus, etc., and what that means to a system.
Well, there's a big topic, isn't it? Yeah, I think, what Scott said is that they both describe unity, and that the intervening signs are various states of activity, you could say, or manifestation, at least within the realm of the astrological symbolism, right? But of course, we don't have time to actually go through each sign and try to describe. We could, however, mention Gemini, which is a kind of formal dualism that occurs. And I think that's halfway between, isn't it, Scott? Let's see, we have Taurus and Gemini, then no, it's a little more towards the beginning. But anyway, yeah, so you have this dualistic sign between the two synthetic signs. But as Scott mentioned too, Libra is a triple sign, but there's a unity in that triplicity. Do you have any thoughts on that, Scott?
Hold on, let me. Yeah. There you go.
No.
Okay.
No, not much.
Well,
Gets into other things. I mean, the other two cardinal signs, if we're going to work with Aries and Libra, if we're going to look at this entropy change, you got to bring in how Cancer and Capricorn work that cardinal cross. But I don't think we want to go there at this point.
No, we can't really do that now. Yeah, the infinite, wonderful possibilities, of these tangents that we could go on, but we're gonna discipline ourselves and stay with the subject matter. But thank you for making that point of the idea of unity and then entropy. Okay. Anyone else?
Well, I just wanted to say, since you guys have been skirting around the issue, that in Esoteric Astrology, page 348 or thereabouts, DK talks about the influence of Gemini and Ray 2, and how Gemini is one of the most important of the signs lying behind every other sign. And he talks about specifically the balancing of the triangles with Gemini and the other two opposing signs. So the triangle of Aries, Libra with Gemini, the triangle of Taurus, Scorpio with Gemini. And then, of course, when you get to Gemini, Sagittarius, it's balanced through Pisces. But it's right there in all of them. And, of course, the keynote for Gemini and the waning, I see the other self, and in the waning of the one, the other grows, or I'm sorry, I can't think of the exact words right now, but that's the whole point, and that's what's happening here, is that as the one wanes, the other grows until you reach that equilibrium in the middle through Gemini here.
Yeah, I remember reading that in Esoteric Astrology that Gemini rules all the 6 axes, and as you described it more fully, right? Yeah, thanks, Biel. Okay.
And then we have a hand up. Let me find it. Carrie. Go ahead, Carrie, you're self-muted. Oops, there. Now you're self-muted. Carrie, there.
Yeah. I just thought it'd be interesting for everybody to know that there's a statue of Bruno in Rome at the point where he was burnt at the stake. And he is in front of a huge church, but the sculptor has put him with his back facing the church.
Mm,
It's very powerful.
perfect symbolism.
In the Campo di Fiori, I think it is, the
Uh-huh.
Square of the Flowers.
Thank you, Carrie, for that. It's so appropriate, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, you know, if spirituality if the church had been able to expand their understanding, they would see that there was absolutely no conflict, put forward by this idea of a solar-centered universe. But such were the times, and such was the Inquisition. Okay, let's see. So this quote on Ralph Waldo Emerson reads Transcendence short, so I'll read it. Transcendentalism exemplified in the writings of Ralph Waldo Emerson emphasizes the power of the transcendental over the physical. Many of Emerson's writings show pronounced Oriental influence, particularly his essays on the Oversoul and the law of compensation. So I looked into transcendentalism a little bit. It recognizes that divinity pervades all nature, including humanity. Its members, which included David Thoreau, Henry David Thoreau, were among the first feminists. They also experimented with communal living. In short, they would have made great hippies. And we could go further with this, but because MPH just mentions it in passing, we'll move on as well. We'll pass over MPH's bibliography of this survey. Number of important books listed here. And begin a summary. So, can we get a reader for...
Yes, Michael, can you read that for us, please?
Having thus traced the more or less sequential development of philosophic speculation from Thales to James and Bergson, it is now in order to direct the reader's attention to the elements leading to and the circumstances attendant upon the genesis of philosophic thinking. Although the Hellenes proved themselves peculiarly responsive to the disciplines of philosophy, this science of sciences should not be considered indigenous to them. Although some of the Grecians, writes Thomas Stanley, have challenged to their nation the original of philosophy, yet the more learned of them have acknowledged it to be derived from the East. The magnificent institutions of Hindu, Chaldean, and Egyptian learning must be recognized as the actual source of Greek wisdom. The last was patterned after the shadow cast by the sanctuaries of Eldora, Ur, and Memphis upon the thought substance of a primitive people. Thales, Pythagoras, and Plato, in their philosophic wanderings, contacted many distant cults and brought back the lore of Egypt and the inscrutable Orient.
Thanks, Michael. You might remember that Thales was one of the original group of 7, or as later corrected, 5 great philosophers that began the tradition of philosophy in ancient Greece. Important point, though, is the magnificent institution of Hindu, Chaldean, and Egyptian learning must be recognized as the actual source of Greek wisdom. If we're willing to lift one more veil, we might hypothesize that those great initiates that incarnated in ancient India, Chaldea, and Egypt reincarnated among the Greeks. Thus, there was both a cross-pollination and a passing down of the ageless wisdom from culture to culture, as well as a continual continuity through the incarnation and overshadowing of the great ones. So nothing is lost that isn't reestablished and rediscovered. Up next, can we get a reader for this, please?
Antonella, can you read that for us, please? You're self-muted.
Yes, can you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay. From indisputable facts such as these, it is evident that philosophy emerged from the religious mysteries of antiquity, not being separated from religion until after the decay of the mysteries. Hence, he who would fathom the depths of philosophic thought must familiarize himself with the teachings of those initiated priests designated as the first custodians of divine revelation. The mysteries claim to be the guardians of a transcendental knowledge so profound as to be incomprehensible, save to the most exalted intellect, and so potent as to be revealed with safety only to those in whom personal ambition was dead, and who had consecrated their lives to the unselfish service of humanity. Both the dignity of these sacred institutions and the validity of their claim to possession of universal wisdom are attested by the most illustrious philosophers of antiquity, who were themselves initiated into the profundities of the secret doctrine and who bore witness to its efficacy.
Thank you, Antonella.
Thank you.
So any thoughts or questions about this paragraph? Anything that was brought up? In his statement, it is evident that philosophy emerged from the religious mysteries of antiquity, not being separated from religion until after the decay of the mysteries. MPH makes an important point, but I would suggest one change. It was religion and the associated understanding of the mysteries that decayed, not the mysteries themselves. It's just semantics, but it's an important point. At any rate, there have always been exoteric religious institutions, as well as thriving esoteric communities, the latter often standing at the core of the outer form. In Greece, the outer expression was represented by the teachings of Homer and the public utterances of the philosophers. The inner by the Eleusinian and other mystery schools, as well as the private teachings of philosophers to their students. It wasn't really until the Christian era that the esoteric schools were driven underground, were forced into a kind of societal exile. It just became too dangerous to be a part of these societies. So they didn't re-emerge until pretty much after the Inquisition had run its course. I think modern Masonry started in England, re-emerged, I should say, in England in 1717, I believe it was. So next, the mysteries claim to be the guardians of a transcendental knowledge so profound as to be incomprehensible, save to the most exalted intellect, and so potent as to be revealed with safety only to those in whom personal ambition was dead and who had consecrated their lives to the unselfish service of humanity. Actually, the mysteries are never known through the intellect, no matter how exalted, at least that's my opinion, but only through the faculty of intuition, which takes the form of illumination. And yes, the potency cannot be tolerated by the personality aspect, but only by an integrated soul-aligned vehicle, pledged to the, quote, unselfish service of humanity. So any thoughts or questions on these ideas? Okay, up next, we're reaching the end of the introduction, folks. Can we get a reader for this paragraph?
Yvonne, can you read that for us, please?
Sure. The question may legitimately be propounded. If these ancient mystical institutions were of such great pith and moment, why is so little information now available concerning them and the arcana they claim to possess? The answer is simple enough. The mysteries were secret societies, binding their initiates to inviolable secrecy and avenging with death the betrayal of their sacred trust. Although these schools were the true inspiration of the various doctrines promulgated by the ancient philosophers, the fountainhead of those doctrines was never revealed to the profane. Furthermore, in the lapse of time, the teachings became so inextricably linked with the names of their disseminators that the actual but recondite source, the mysteries, came to be wholly ignored.
It's a very interesting paragraph. Any thoughts, any questions about this? One might ask, but what was different about the mysteries given in secret societies and what has come to us through Blavatsky and Bailey, for example? The answer, as I see it, is sacred information can be divided into two groups. The first, that which can be safely given out, and two, info that can be misused by the acolyte, either because of their inherent unreadiness or through deliberate misuse. That said, the info now publicly available, as for instance through these two sources, Blavatsky and Bailey, is far more extensive and occult than it was in ancient times, than the information publicly available in ancient times. In fact, I'm sure that for instance, DK has revealed in his teachings would have been secret in those times. And to actually put a finer point on it, was secret in those times, because certainly this information was known to the great masters of the ancient world. Okay, up next, we get into some symbolism.
We have a comment from Roz. She says, I find I automatically hide anything esoteric with people who may react negatively to it. It is a natural, she says, is it a natural thing to do?
Certainly is. And that's very wise of you. It's I think a source of frustration for many of us that the whole world doesn't get this material, and there's a natural tendency to want to get it out there and have it recognized and understood. But this really is where the pearls before swine comes in. The swine being a state of consciousness, not these actual people, that some people just aren't yet ready to hear this information, and it really is best to stay silent in the face of that. So I think your instinct is right on with that. And yet you can be overcautious. You can also keep an eye out for a possible opportunity. Sometimes people surprise you and they're ready. So it's a fine line. This kind of takes a conscious state of readiness to navigate this. Anyone else? Okay. At any rate, none of us know any what you might call truly secret occult information by which knowledge we could disrupt the natural processes. Often these are secrets of initiation, because when used responsibly by someone who is soul infused, can actually do great good in the world. But until that time, that information must and is hidden, must be and is hidden. Okay. Up next, symbolism. Can we get a reader, please?
Pia, can you read that for us? You're self-muted. Nope, not coming. Okay, can you read that for us, Scott, please?
Symbolism is the language of the mysteries. In fact, it is the language not only of mysticism and philosophy, but of all nature. For every law and power active in universal procedure is manifested to the limited sense perceptions of man through the medium of symbol. Every form existing in the diversified sphere of being is symbolic of the divine activity by which it is produced. By symbols, men have ever sought to communicate to each other those thoughts which transcend the limitations of language. Rejecting man-conceived dialectics is inadequate and unworthy to perpetuate divine ideas. The mysteries thus chose symbolism as a far more ingenious and ideal method of preserving their transcendental knowledge. In a single figure, a symbol may both reveal and conceal. For to the wise, the subject of the symbol is obvious, while to the ignorant, the figure remains inscrutable. Hence, he who seeks to unveil the secret doctrine of antiquity must search for that doctrine not upon the open pages of books, which might fall into the hands of the unworthy, but in the place where it was originally concealed.
AKA the symbol. Thanks, Scott. Any thoughts or questions on this? Succinct, nicely stated.
I'm not sure that I'm not sure that the cause and effect of rejecting man-conceived dialectics is the cause of symbolism. I think it's, from what everything I got from DK, is the symbolism is the way it's been forever transmitted to the masters, to the initiates, and that precedes any man-conceived dialectics or interpretations.
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying? The mysteries didn't choose symbolism. Symbolism was the mysteries.
Yeah, I think it's actually just that, it's not that well written. I think what he's really saying here is that symbolism transcends man-conceived dialectics.
For sure.
Rather than the cause or the reason that we, created symbolism was, that this was somehow the reason for that.
Are you going to bring in DK's definition of symbolism that he uses throughout his books?
I touch on it, but why don't you say something about it now? The
quote is about symbolism is, I challenged you on it to see if you're doing it, is the, what is it? It's something about, somebody else will remember this because it's used. There we go. That's the one. Symbol is an outer invisible sign.
Yeah, boy, talk about being on the same page, I tell you.
There it is. Thank you.
Yeah. Why don't you go ahead and read it?
Oh, okay. A symbol is an outer invisible sign of an inner and spiritual reality. That's the one. Carried out into expression upon the physical plane by the force of the inner embodied life. An emblem is man's formulation of a concept, created by man and embodying for him the truth as he sees it and understands it.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. So it has to do with the direction of its original formulation, right? An emblem being something conceived by man to represent an idea. Symbols are very specifically exist on, I'm thinking it's the, that it's on the, which plane is it on? Let me think.
Boudic?
The one above, I think.
Maybe. Is that Atmic, monadic? No.
Yeah, I'm thinking it's the Atmic because that's the
I think so too.
higher reflection of the mental. And so I think that's the causal level of symbolism, of the symbol. And it's a living reality in that place. And it gives form, it being the third plane, to an idea, which is on the second plane. I think that's right. He specifically describes this. I don't go into it here, but yeah. So it's the point being, everyone, that this is a very highly placed reality. These actual symbols, right? And he's making a distinction here between those and emblems, which are created by human beings to represent. And some of them are very fine and useful, but there's a distinction.
And Yvonne's hand is raised.
Hi, Yvonne. Yes.
In Glamour, a World Problem, DK says that the study of symbols is the method suggested for developing the intuition, which is the main tool for dissipating illusion. And that's just the study of symbols, and that's out of Glamour. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. In fact, that's why this marvelous introduction to symbolism is also the introduction to Glamour, a World Problem, because it turns out that it is the most effective way to dispel glamour. It's very interesting because it calls forth the intuition, and it's through the intuition that glamour is dispelled. You know, so because on the surface you say, why is this fabulous treatise on symbolism the introduction to Glamour, a World Problem? But that's the reason. So thanks for bringing that forward. And Veronica writes, Master DK says that where the lines cross in a symbol, they are gates of energy to an inner reality truth. Sorry, I can't remember the exact word, but that's the general meaning. Ooh, I like that. Yeah, I don't recall that. That's a really useful insight. Where the lines cross, how interesting. Yeah. Great. So it's interesting too that, in Libra, there are no crossing lines, but on many of the symbols there are. It'd be interesting to revisit all the symbols and with that thought in mind, right? I mean, if you think of chakra centers, that's literally the potency of the chakra is defined by how many lines of energy are crossing, right? So we can see the connection there. Okay, back to this paragraph. He says,
I think we still have a hand up.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead, please, Antonella.
Yes,
there.
Thank you. I was wondering, for example, the difference between a symbol and an archetype, because technically a symbol, if it is an outer sign of an inner reality, everything in manifestation is symbol of that. But the archetype maybe is not manifested outerly. So what is your thought about this? Also considering that symbol comes from symbaline Greek, which means put together. An archetype is like a type, an original type, and arche means sacred or original. So there are many words for this word of ideas. So symbols, right. You put, where do you put, did you put the symbols, in what plane?
Well, I think the Atmic is the likely source. However, you could also say in reflection, in the higher mental, that you would find, the living symbol there. But a symbol by its very nature veils the living idea, which is actually a form of livingness. It's like entified, these ideas, right? Because ideas are not, many of what we call ideas are drawn from these ideas, capital I, you could say, that are symbolized by a symbol, that are, in a sense, veiled by a symbol, right? But also, reverse engineering, you can access these ideas through a symbol if your intuition is active, right? So in the contemplation of a symbol, using your intuition, the idea is some part, some aspect of that idea is revealed.
Yeah.
What were you going to say?
Yeah. I wonder if the symbol is just at a sort of connection with the etheric level, when you are using it through intuition to arrive to the inner reality, and considering that it is an outer expression of a living reality, of a living idea, instead of words like ideals, archetypes. So it would be interesting to understand if it is possible to put these living beings in a particular position in the planes of substance or living substance.
Yeah,
because
well,
to me, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
No, to me, symbol is just a medium put together to words. So it could be at any level of manifestation of cosmic planes, substance. Anyway.
Yeah, but I think these symbols that shroud divine ideas are highly placed. A really good example is, DK says at a certain initiation, the five-pointed star flashes above the head of the initiate. This is nothing. This is not an emblem. This is nothing conceived by man. This is some definite, specific configuration that spontaneously shines forth when a certain type of energy is, you could say, used. In this case, that this five-pointed star is the symbol of the energy that is passed to the initiate at the time of initiation, and we see you could say the externalization of that energy would be this symbol, this five-pointed star.
Yeah,
and then he talks about triangles being even higher, an equilateral triangle being, and the seven-pointed star. I know he mentions those three as definitely concerned with initiation. Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. So to me, it's like the symbol of the five-pointed star, for example, could be really at all levels, till the etheric, which is the seventh level, but the principle of the five-pointed star is still another thing. So it's like the symbol shining on the head of the initiate. For who have eyes to see it, they can see also as a real or not real, concrete reality. But the principle beyond the symbol of the five-pointed star is the five-pointed star, which is the number 5 or whatever we want to, or the Manasaputra principle or whatever, the fire and so on. So just wondering why the human language have invented different code or names to name all these entities, like, for example, as I said, archetype, symbol, and so on. So to me, the archetype can't be probably in the etheric, must be in the higher mental. So
yeah, I think possibly even higher. Here's the thing: whose archetype? Where is this being created? I think of archetype is very much connected with the Manu, who is the creating these initial forms. It's really not even the blueprint of the form, but the energetic configuration that will become the blueprint, which then becomes the form. You know, and yeah, I think in some ways they have a lot to do with symbols. You know, the two are interchangeable, but I think they're also quite distinct from each other. You know, in one way, you could say that the archetype just precedes the outer. It's the inner blueprint of the outer, you know, but very specifically in theosophy, it takes me to the work of the Manu and that line of masters. Anybody else have any thoughts on that? I'm not the final authority, folks.
Scott has his hand up, so let's go ahead, Scott.
Not on that particular point. I was just recalling when DK brings up this point about symbols being so archetypal, if we can say so. And then the immediate question that came to me, and probably everyone reading that, was like, okay, so like what symbols are you talking about? If they're of such a high origin and they're so fundamental, what are you talking about? And I remember him listing things like basically the 3-pointed star, the square, the 5-pointed star, ancient ones and modern ones like the torch, I think, and maybe the heart. There's certain modern ones that have been added that are the symbols he's talking about, that fundamental level.
There's 8 symbols, and I can't recite them, but they're in that introduction, and one of them was definitely the cross, and peculiarly, I'll be able to say that word, the 4, gosh, how do I describe this? It appears on the World Tarot card. What are those called? Are they the symbols of the fixed signs?
That might be.
You have Aquarius, Leo. I think so.
Mm-hmm. Yes, there's always the fixed sign. Yeah, those 4.
I think it's the 4 that appear on the world card. But they, and these aren't what we think of as, geometrical symbols at all. And yet I believe that he lists those as and I know he lists some subjective pictorial, you might say, symbols, as well as what you would expect, which would be the geometrical ones, right?
And the way he uses, the one I remember that I love is the way he takes the first 5 digits of pi and presents them in symbolic form. The triangle, the triangle 1 or dot, and the square, a dot, and a 5-pointed star.
Fabulous. Yeah.
It's like, yes, there's something there, a lot there.
Yeah, and one of the most exciting things about what you just said is that this is not just a fraction, folks. This is not just, some part of, the 0.1415 of 1. It's very symbolic of the energies represented in what he's describing, which is pi. Yeah, it's fabulous stuff. And of course, we can't get past the 5-pointed star without saying that all the relationship in the 5-pointed star is phi, right?
Yes.
The golden means. That's what defines the interrelation of the 5-pointed star.
Just one little add.
I'm sorry?
I remember also that the case says that on the Buddhic plane, devas and humans meet and speak through symbols. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you imagine? Well, all you have to do is go to Sinzar. There it is. The series of symbols. That's a symbolic language that can describe the complexity of, whatever it's describing just through symbols. Yeah, it's extraordinary. Anyone else?
Yes,
Anything else?
Carrie also has his hand up.
Yeah, just going back to this idea of where lines cross, a new energy is precipitated. It's interesting that all the planets, all the symbols for all the planets have got a cross in them, except for Pluto. Except for Mars. All the symbols have a cross. All of them have a cross.
But it does have a kind of, well, you could also say Vulcan.
Well, it has an arrow, but the arrow doesn't actually cross the circle from which it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
So,
and then of course
the only
also is. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was only going to say the only letter in the alphabet is actually X, which is again the cross, which is there are no others except you could say Q has got a cross through it, but
T has a cross in it as well.
Oh, I was thinking of capital letters.
Oh, I see. Well, yeah,
uppercase letters. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's fair.
Yeah. Okay. I thought I mentioned it. That's all.
Yeah. Let's get together and we'll have dinner and about 6 hours of discussion on this kind of thing. It's just fabulous. It's just wonderful to have open-ended discussion. So yeah, thank you, Carrie. Okay. So in this paragraph, MPH gives us two definitions of the symbol. First, he says, and Antonella pointed this out, every form existing in the diversified sphere of being is symbolic of the divine activity by which it is produced, suggesting that if we but knew how to read nature, we could step outside our house and the first plant we see would, through the geometry of its design, reveal its origins, right? It becomes a symbol for its source, right? And an outer symbol of the energies that made up its source. Shamanism is very much concerned with following the natural worlds to its origin, reading the outer in order to discover these inner meanings, right? But for MPH's second definition, we read, in a single figure, a symbol may both reveal and conceal. For to the wise, the subject of the symbol is obvious, while to the ignorant, the figure remains inscrutable. And often in so doing, we protect the wise, right? This is the more traditional definition, and one that underlies much of the subject matter presented in this book. You'll find that there is often an underlying symbol or a series of underlying symbols for what we'll be reading about. Okay, next up, could we get a reader for this?
Okay, let's go to Lynn, if I can find her. Okay, there we go. Hold on. There's two of you. All right. Is that? There you go.
I shared my email with others.
Okay, there you go.
You want me to read?
Yes, please.
Yes, please.
Okay, far-sighted were the initiates of antiquity. They realized that nations come and go, that empires rise and fall, and that the golden ages of art, science, and idealism are succeeded by the dark ages of superstition. With the needs of posterity foremost in mind, the sages of old went into inconceivable extremes to make certain that their knowledge should be preserved. They engraved it upon the face of mountains and concealed it within the measurements of colossal images, each of which was a geometric marvel. Their knowledge of chemistry and mathematics they hid within mythologies, which the ignorant would perpetuate, or in the spans and arches of their temples, which time was not entirely obliterated. They wrote in characters that neither the vandalism of men nor the ruthlessness of the elements could completely efface. Today, men gaze with awe and reverence upon the mighty Memnons standing alone on the sands of Egypt, or upon the strange terraced pyramids of Palenque. Mute testimonies these are of the lost arts and sciences of antiquity, and concealed this wisdom must remain until this race has learned to read the universal language, symbolism.
So any thoughts or questions on this paragraph? There are a couple of examples of significant embedded...
We have a comment from Anne Veronica here. I just want to make sure I'm getting the latest one. Let me make it bigger. Okay, there we go. I believe everything we see is a symbol that can lead us to an inner truth. The geometrical symbols are just compact energy, and simultaneously it is so simple that makes you leave the concrete mind and leads you to try to touch your intuition. One day, when I was in a church, it just hit me. The hierarchy was there in front of me, given in the Christian way, but it was there.
Very nicely said. You span both of MPH's definitions, you know, that, like you say, there's symbolism in everything that we see, because everything that we see has a causal level beyond it. And if we can but read the outer, it can take us to the inner. And of course, institutions such as churches are just rife with these types of symbols, right? Okay, so here's a couple of examples of significant embedded measurements in ancient Egypt, which he mentions in this paragraph. The upper left illustration reveals how the relative size and degree of tilt of the Earth and Moon are embedded in the proportion of the Great Pyramid at Giza. Here are the Memnons of Egypt that he describes. For scale, note the person in the bottom right corner. And here is the awesome stepped pyramid at Palenque. So before we consider the final paragraph of the introduction, let's take a look at the illustration in the middle of page 20. A great example, by the way, of a non-geometric yet highly esoteric symbol. Can we get a reader for this, please?
Yes. Frida, can you read that for us, please?
Sure. The ancient symbol of the Orphic Mysteries was serpent entwined egg, which signified cosmos as encircled by the fiery creative spirit. The egg also represents the soul of the philosopher, the serpent, the mysteries. At the time of initiation.
Stop just a minute. I'm sorry. I lost your thought. Could you turn off whoever was just speaking?
Yeah, sorry, that was my.
Oh, that was you. Oh, okay. All right. Could you start over, please?
So can you hear me?
Yes, fine. Could you start over, please?
Sure. The ancient symbol of the Orphic Mysteries was the serpent entwined egg, which signified cosmos as encircled by the fiery creative spirit. The egg also represents the soul of the philosopher, the serpent, the mysteries. At the time of initiation, the shell is broken and the man emerges from the embryonic state of physical existence wherein he had remained through the fetal period of philosophic regeneration.
Thank you. Any thoughts about this? Any questions? So the serpent has come up many, many times. And if you've been with us in the Secret Doctrine, you know, it's a constant symbol, right? It is, if we've come to learn, also represents the phohatic, fecundating aspect of the universal mind. The serpent's coils surrounding the egg can be seen as the influence of cyclic time. And just keep in mind this symbol when we look at our next illustration, which prefaces the first chapter, the serpent encircled Mithras. So, okay, on to the final paragraph of the introduction. Can we get a reader?
Carrie, can you read that for us, please?
Okay. The book to which this is the introduction is dedicated to the proposition that concealed within the emblematic figures, allegories, and rituals of the ancients is a secret doctrine concerning the inner mysteries of life, which doctrine has been preserved in toto among a small band of initiated minds since the beginning of the world. Departing, these illumined philosophers left their formulae that others too might attain to understanding. But lest these secret processes fall into uncultured hands and be perverted, the great arcanum was always concealed in symbol or allegory. And those who can today discover its lost keys may open with them a treasure house of philosophic, scientific, and religious truths.
Thanks, Carrie. So any thoughts, final thoughts on symbolism or questions about this? You know, a terrific example is the a tarot deck. Just get the weight or Crowley or, and take a look at these amazing symbols. Now, you could have an argument about, are they emblematic or are they symbolic? I think it's a mix myself. I think there are true symbols that exist in the tarot, and there are also some more man-created stuff, especially in the later decks. We don't know, the original deck, unquote, which is said to be connected with Hermes Trismegistus. So, but it's certainly a fabulous source for symbolic thought. So in this introduction, MPH has given us a survey of many of the significant philosophers in the Western tradition, from the earliest Greek to the present, though we must note, none from India or the Orient. Many of the thinkers he chronicles were not esoterically oriented. In contradistinction to this, I think we'll find pretty much all the remaining chapters of the Secret Teachings to be dedicated to the ageless wisdom. So next up, we turn the page to chapter 1, the Ancient Mysteries and Secret Societies, subtitle, which have influenced modern Masonic symbolism. And the comparison I wanted you to draw is between that Orphic egg and the serpent coiled in both cases, right? So let's take a closer look at the awesome image on the left, one of my favorites in the book. First, let's consider the title of the image, Mithra, in the form of leontocephalic Kronos, okay? Mithra was a Zoroastrian solar genie whose abode was the sun. Leontocephalic simply means lion-headed. Kronos is the ruler of time, often associated with Saturn, or proto-Saturn if you're looking at cosmic reality, whose number is universally 7. So the title could be translated to mean a Zoroastrian solar genie in the form of a lion-headed ruler of time. So could we get a reader just for this first paragraph?
Okay, Martha, I would like you to read for us, but you also have your hand up. So start with your question, and then will you read when you're finished, okay?
Thank you very much. I'm just asking if the lion's head has an astrological implication, such as Regulus, or coincidence. Thank you. And then I'll.
Yeah, I'm not a big believer in coincidence myself. I think, yeah, definitely. He describes somewhat what the lion's head means in here, but astrologically, of course, it's also associated with Leo. It's, you know, considered the highest example of the animal kingdom, and therefore of the personality or third aspect of human development. But he also has a further take on that. So you could say that it is the lion that then steps on the path that leads to Aquarius, right? Which is the individual at its highest level of development, right? Then takes the journey to group consciousness, right?
Thank you, Francis.
Yeah, so that, and you'll get more on that in one of the slides that's coming up. So,
Okay.
and if you would read.
At the pinnacle of the divine hierarchy, writes Franz Cumont, and at the origin of all things, the Mithraic theology, the heir of that of the Zervanite Magi, placed boundless time. Sometimes they would call it seculum, Saturnus, but these appellations were conventional and contingent, for he was considered ineffable, bereft alike of name, sex, and passions. See the Mysteries of Mithra.
Thank you. So any thoughts about this? There's a lot in this little paragraph. The Zervanitic Magi were priests of the oldest form of Zoroastrianism, called Zervanism. Zervan seems to be a third logos type god akin to Brahma and Oyahu the Younger, for those in the SD webinars. What's important here is the placement, like in so many ancient religions, of boundless time, capital T, at the, quote, pinnacle of the divine hierarchy. It's the first sentence. This predates the fall of Saturn, for at this stage he was one with the sun. Zervan was also often depicted wrapped in the coils of a snake. In fact, it was probably one of these ancient statues that inspired J.A. Knapp's illustration. Here's Heru Wasu, or Vasu, the Egyptian god of time, equivalent to Zervan. Note how, like Zervan, he holds the pairs of opposites in his outstretched hands, and like Knapp's illustration, has two sets of wings. In fact, the figure itself is dual, man and falcon, only brought together in the visage of the lion's face. Okay, back to Knapp's image. The figure signifies the inevitable victory of boundless time, capital T, time, eternity, over every creature and condition. In time, all beings reach completion. In time, all wrongs are righted. In time, salvation is assured to all. Time, as used in this sentence, stands in a causal relationship to sequential time. Remember Joseph Campbell, eternity has nothing to do with time. Eternity is not a long time. Eternity has nothing to do with time. Well, that's the kind of time that's being described here. In esoteric teachings, the distinction between the two kinds of time, is often indicated by the term duration, wherein all becoming has been achieved, as represented by the perfection of this avatar, who rules a segment, at least, of the Manvantara. In theosophy, that, quote, time wherein all beings reach completion is called the day be with us. Okay, The head of the lion, to reference Martha's question, signifies that the mortal concept of time is the despotic ruler of the animal or irrational creation, that its strength is supreme, temporarily supreme, and that it devours all the lesser powers which exist temporarily within it. So here we have the symbol of cyclic time, the quote, despotic ruler of all form, which holds the indwelling jiva captive until the form aspect is finally transcended. The coils of the serpent represent the motion of the heavenly spheres through the zodiac, which is shown as a human body. So the body is the form aspect, or heavenly spheres, and the coils represent cyclic passage of these spheres through the zodiac. We see this zodiacal passage depicted in a later but similar Roman version of the god of time called Epiphania. You can see the zodiac surrounding it. The golden key indicates that time, or as duration, is the key to the mystery of existence. Why? Because the mystery of existence can only be known when the prison of sequential time is transcended, and we enter the realm of time as duration, the environment of pure beingness. By the way, if you have a question anytime during this, just chime in, put your hand up. The sword is the instrument by which the demon of man-made time is slain and his body divided into past and future, while to the gods is given the rulership of the everlasting now. It's very interesting. This reminds me of the phrase, I mount upon my slain self, which appears at the very end of DK's first book, Initiation Human and Solar. The sword is often associated with the mind, hence the phrase, the mind is the slayer of the real, but also slays that slayer. In the latter sense, it slays the illusion that grips the lower self. Thus, it is appropriately held by Mithra's left hand. The double set of wings signifies the flight of time through the inferior worlds of the four elements, which we might add are other than the timeless higher realms usually inhabited by Mithra.
Francis?
This idea is, yeah.
Antonella has her hand up. Go ahead, Antonella.
Yeah, if you go back to the complete picture, I remember in esoteric astrology that Saturn is related to Leo and the Great Bear, and you can see in the picture in the left upper side a chariot, which could be the Great Bear, and which is called the mother of the time. Also in Egyptian, Blavatsky says that. So it tells me that Saturn is not only this third aspect, but it's really this boundless time, which is precipitating this power of the seven rays emanated by the great bears, the seven rishis. And Leo also is this sign that is so important for this current second solar system, which is the sign of Sirius and our sun, ruled by the sun. So just to add another, the key, astrological key to this relationship between those stars in the right hand of Mitra, and so we have the stars and then the mind on the left hand is interesting, related to the upper world and the lower means to apply the laws of the heavens.
Yeah, thank you, Antonella. Yeah, you have a kind of proto-Saturn in the Great Bear, and I remember reading that this is very much connected with the initiating of time.
Yeah, and and it's related to the first aspect and to Shambhala in these three great lines. So you have Great Bear, Leo, Saturn, Shambhala, the head center of the initiate, and the base chakra. So it's really the power line. And usually you associate Saturn to the third aspect. But in these three lines of precipitation of the three main constellations, Great Bear, Sirius, and Pleiades, you have Saturn and Leo. So should be something related to this mystery of Mithra.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that out, because he doesn't address that upper left corner, which is actually quite significant. He doesn't address that in this particular description. It's also interesting to look in the right, where you have the moon, the opposite kind of quality, the first aspect, the spirit aspect, and the form aspect described. Yeah. Good stuff. Thank you, Antonella.
Okay, and Scott also has his hand up, but Aunt Veronica has given us a couple of things. Aunt Veronica says, in a lower interpretation, 8 5-pointed stars, 8 times 5 equals 40, equals 4, the fourth plane, the Buddhic intuition. The serpent is the key, or after the fire, Kundalini, passes through the chakras, you are given the key. And then she says the masters can see time from top to bottom. Oops. You see the stars there in his hand?
Yeah, right.
Right.
Yeah, the 8 there. And the 8 is also the octave, and so it's very much connected with that octave when we move from personality to soul, which exists on the Buddhic plane. So yeah, thanks for that. And Scott?
I was going to address that too, that octave of the 8 stars being the number of Christ, second person. The whole thing is quite Christ-like, looking at 7 rounds around the body, which can be the centers not only in our human body, but the centers in the solar egoic body of the sacred planets. And yet the 8th one transcends it, goes behind the head. And here you have 8 stars, and that 8th coil goes up to the key.
Yeah.
And it tracks down, as it always does, as you know, from the right hand receiving to the left hand dispensing. So it's coming down through those 8 stars and then being dispensed through the left hand of the sword, which is also a symbol often of a snake and or Moses' staff, that idea of it transcending. But also the mind, I think, is truly there. And it's a close, I don't know, there's a lot of 8 and 4 in here. And I think the top there it's not the sun per se, but is Sirius. And I think Saturn's up there. Well, who knows? Those are additions. Can be Saturn specifically or just representing the planets and the moon, the planets, the Great Bear. Maybe Sirius on top.
Yeah. And also he's, like Christ, he ascends from the tomb. And, it really adds meaning to, that biblical story, that it's not just, they roll the stone and then he gets out. This is the tomb caused by sequential time, that he transcends that. And that's the tomb he's rising above here,
An initiative, a high level.
I'd say. Yes, and of course, Mithra was very much a Christ-like avatar figure. Yeah.
And his background has the same, well, the stories of him have the one that links all the solar saviors and deities together in terms of their life, where he came from and so forth. It's very solar and universal.
Yeah. Yeah, and we'll be getting into it because he devotes a section, this coming chapter, to the Mithraic tradition, which should be really interesting. You notice, folks, that the sword here, how serpentine it is, and that the bottom tail of that wraps around the sword, is so to relate the two together. So, yeah, I think you're right in that observation, Scott. Okay. Any other thoughts before we move on? I think we were looking at this double set of wings. Double set of wings signifies the flight of time through the inferior worlds of the four elements, which we might add are other than the timeless higher realms inhabited by Mithra. This idea is also found in Hinduism in the form of Garuda, who is the vehicle or vahana of Vishnu. Garuda's special talent is his ability to penetrate into the realm of time and space, thus allowing Vishnu to appear in the three worlds of human endeavor. An interesting side note is that Garuda is actually of unsurpassed beauty, but appears demonic because of the distortion caused by time and space. I love those kind of details in the Hindu mythology. It's just really great stuff.
Francis?
Yeah.
And Veronica adds that isn't a lion one of the symbols animals before the throne of God?
I believe so. It's one of the four, yeah. Yeah. And I think that has to do with the fact that it's emblematic of Leo. And so it's one of the fixed signs. Yeah. Okay. Onward. And keep breaking in, anybody who wants to say something. The 8 stars are the spheres upheld by time, which are from the inside out: Earth, Moon, Mercury, Venus, and the Sun, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. At least that's one way to look at it. I'm sure it has a higher correspondence, as suggested by others. The dome of the Mithraic cave is ornamented with stars to typify the universality of the divine cult. And the radiant globe upon which the figure stands is the universe. Again, suggesting that this figure has transcended time. Mithra, in his aspect as the god of time, has transcended the manifested universe. The resurrection of the figure from the darkness of the tomb reveals the ascension of boundless duration from the narrow limitations of man-conceived time. I think we've covered that. And finally, the 3 kneeling figures are the limitations of the 3-dimensional world: length, breadth, and thickness, which bow before the limitless eon. So any final thoughts or questions on what I think is a pretty remarkable illustration? Anyone?
Yes, hold on. Okay, go ahead. Okay, you're... I think we're working at cross purposes. There you go.
Thank you. It's Martha. Thank you. Just to ask if you commented a little bit more on thickness.
Oh, it's just, I think it's actually kind of a
density, or I know the physical notion.
Just 3 dimensions. I think it's actually a kind of awkward word that I puzzled over that myself. It's, you could say length, breadth, and height. Would I think be, I think it's what's really ingenious is that he's personified these abstractions as figures. I think that's really interesting.
They look like reversals in some ways of the three
They look
aspects.
like what?
They look like reversals with breadth, which signifies so much to us. And length, I suppose, could be seen as expansion, and just thickness, as ignorance. But it's such a rich image, as you said. There's no need to elaborate it beyond what was intended. Just wanted to check out if I was missing something.
There's no need to, but that shouldn't stop us. If anybody has any ideas at all, this is it's always fruitful to explore these images as deeply and as we can.
Scott,
yeah.
Scott has his hand up. Go ahead, Scott.
3 aspects of the personality, and since we're dealing also with concept of Saturn as time, they can be past, present, and future. Any trinity of the lesser. Just bowing to and acknowledging a higher unity. And source.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, what you said. The 3 aspects of the personality. Yeah, but I like the abstraction of past, present, and future. With the present in the middle, which seems the most aligned to the universal or the unity. I like that a lot. In fact, this brings up something, folks. This is Hall's stab at an interpretation, and he does a great job, right? But that's not the be all end all, and often you can discover ideas connected with this that maybe more poignant, more relevant to this image than what he has said about this. I think Scott certainly did right there. The 3 dimensions, that's one way you could look at it, but I like, this idea of past, present, and future because it's more specific to the time realm, and since this whole thing is about time, I think it's a better candidate for an explanation of what these 3 figures are.
Okay, we got a number of comments here, and then Scott's got his hand up again. But let me go to these comments, and then we'll go back to you, Scott. Okay. Diana says, "Can we say that limitless is without duration or eternal?"
We use the term duration as a synonym for eternal. That's just the way it's occult use of the word duration is. But limitless is a more generic term, meaning without limit. And if you truly are without limit, then you're outside the manifested realm. That would be true of both time and space, right? This particular illustration focuses very specifically on time, right? These coils, the 7 coils, all periods are divided into 7 cycles, right? And so I would say for that reason, the limitless aspect would be, in this case, akin to time as eternity, which, as occultists describe it, or as the day be with us. Interesting way of describing it. Anyone else?
Yes, we have a number. Laura says, as other people said, the image makes me think of the Christ. There are many elements that seem to represent him and the resurrection. But I wanted to say that one of the kneeling people has put an object on the ground. It is like a white bag with a red spot, which I think that it might symbolize the heart, which must be awakened, and the personal sacrifice which we must learn to make on the path.
Well, that's very poetic. I think it's just his hat. But, That's just one idea. It seems to be about the size of his head, and it looks like maybe it's a turban. However, the other two don't have hats, so maybe you're right. Maybe it's an offering, you know. And you're right, it does. It's very specifically red, which, you know, wouldn't really be what the inside of a hat would look like. So, you know, maybe you've got something there. Yeah. Any other thoughts?
Yes, Lynn says the mudras of the hands. What is their significance?
Yeah. Well, I'm just looking. It's two. Let's see. What I'm seeing is that the one on either side are extending two fingers. And you know that the way they're just outspread, except for those two fingers. I've not seen a mudra that represents specifically. However, it's just that the two fingers, when you close the thumb to the third figure and tuck the little finger in, is a recognition of the intuition. I actually use it in one of my illustrations, and a acknowledgement of soul awareness or soul infusion. But the middle figure just seems to be, it's almost like the Spock on the left, the Spock hand, right, with the 2 and 2 spread, you know. But I think this illustration was before the time of Spock, so I can add no more. If anybody has any thoughts about the hand positions, you're welcome to speak.
We still have several. Oh, okay. And Veronica says the hat could equal the head center. And Carrie says they are also the three kings. And then we have a number of hands still, and one more comment. Antonella says it seems the symbolic representation of the third initiation, transfiguration.
What does?
Well, I think the whole image. Christ and the three sleeping apostles embodied. Let me unmute Antonella.
Yeah, the whole image, it seems that the Christ, the third initiation, when you have also in the Jesus life, when he goes and the disciples felt asleep, if I remember well. But anyway, it's just me that.
Actually, though, I'm going to differ with you on this. I think this is a much higher state of consciousness than the third. And also, what I remember about the transfiguration was that only John was conscious and able to view that initiation. And the other two were either asleep or incapable of viewing it. And because this being is actually transcending sequential time, I think we're looking at a much higher initiation. You know, it's avataric. So it's going to be more like akin to the Christ than of Jesus. Right?
Okay.
Anyone else?
Yes, let's go to Scott. He's had his hand up for a while. Go ahead, Scott. Sorry.
It's okay. Looking at the three of my, there's lots of detail of the three figures there. We can see two of them have girdles around them. The middle one doesn't. Two of them are on their right knees. The third one on the right is on his left knee, and so on. How much of this, though, is
just artists?
Manly P. Hall, and how much of it is, I think, is Knapp, who did the same thing with the tarot deck, the Rider-Waite tarot deck. He did the illustrations there too, did he not? So how much of that is his interpretation he puts in, and Manly P. Hall says, that's fine, that's good. And this description here is maybe by, I don't know who did the description, the write-up on this, but how much of it, the source and that is really Manly P. Hall in this case, and how much of it is the artist? And are we reading way too much into these little differences?
Yeah.
Or are they right? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, if they're significant, it doesn't matter even if the artist knew, because if they're let's see, truly representative of a higher truth, the artist could have just intuited it, without being consciously aware. I think that happens all the time. I think it is significant, and certainly was chosen, that you have a blue sash, a red sash, and an unsashed. That's not. There's no way that's accidental. So yeah, but where do you draw the line? Like with the hands, for instance, is this just artistic or is it meaningful?
There you go.
It's
it's interesting, but I don't know how far. It's like I say with the tarot deck, how far what you get, where the source is, and what you read into it, and how much of it is whatever. It's just
yeah. I think everything
with these kinds of illustrations.
You also have to keep in mind that J.A. Knapp was also just a human being, right? Who did this painting, and so I think it's fabulous, and yet it's certainly limited.
Sure.
When masters of wisdom start painting, we'll be looking at every stroke, right? Anything else on this, folks?
Yes. Michael has his hand up. Go ahead, please, Michael.
Yes, hello, Francis. You mentioned the Spock symbol in the central figure, the live long and prosper. That's actually the symbol Spock used was from a Hebrew blessing. It's actually a symbol of
really?
Really? Yeah.
Oh, that's fascinating. See, that means that it actually could be, it could really be that, because it seems to me very definitely divided in that way. So thank you for bringing that forth. It's just good to know anyway. It's just a general blessing. Is that the way it is?
That's what I understand. I don't recall, in the heat of the moment here, what the actual thing was for, but I'm pretty sure he sort of peeked at what the rabbi was doing, and that's what the symbol he saw.
Uh-huh.
I forget the name of the letter as well, but I've got a few other notes. Do you want me to read them? Do I have time to read them? I took during the rest of the class.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay, so we started out thinking about equilibrium. So I kept some notes around this theme, and one could think of symbols, all symbols, as Libra in nature. And so as we spoke about the Buddha's equilibrium, there's also an element of Libra that has to do with projection. The element of reflection and projection of the desire nature of Aries into the rest of the world, and thus achieving peace both with desire and with the projection of desire received back from the world. And this reminds me of something else. We think of the sun at the center of the solar system, as you mentioned earlier. And while it is relatively at the center of the solar system, it actually is not at the center of the solar system. The center of the solar system is just outside the corona. It's called the barycenter. And this is the influence of Jupiter and the sun. So that's a good picture, I think, of the second love wisdom ray effect on the sun as well. So the sun itself wobbles.
Huh.
That's interesting.
It is. Yeah.
So as we spoke about the Libra symbol having two parts, the upper crescent or circle of spirit, above the flat line of the material plane, shall we say, there's we can sort of fit this into a couple of things. Like we're used to thinking of the Piscean age in terms of Jesus and Christ and the church, but an additional heritage we see from that time is the Greek myths, and these are becoming increasingly valuable and more enduring. And in a way, we can see the curve of the crescent in the Libra symbol as reflecting that Christ and that spirit, whereas the flat line is kind of like an earthy incarnation of those Greek myths mixed into the earth plane, which is again, the Libra element of mixing things. So just, in closing, I think the cardinal mental element of Libra is well described by all these things you've brought up.
Oh, well, thank you for your contribution. That's really fascinating. Well, folks, we're
okay. We got a couple more comments here that I want to read before we wrap it up. Okay. Anne Veronica says, so if we see the planets as chakras in the body of the solar logos and bring it down to the human body, if you unite 8 chakras, wonder what the 8th good may be, the spleen, the human being units his energies and transcends time. Unites, I think she means, his energies and transcends time.
I kind of lost the flow there. Go back a sentence and say that again.
Okay, so if we see the planets as the chakras in the body of the solar logos and bring it down to the human body, if you unite 8 chakras, she says, wonder what the 8th would be, maybe the spleen, then the human body unites his energies, the human being unites his energies and transcends time.
Yeah, well, another way of looking at it is, that star above his head, which I think is very much akin to the snake's head. It even goes through that snake's head. And there is a chakra above the head that is considered like a gateway to the universal, right? It's the kind of thing you deal with in the very highest initiations when it's time to leave this solar system, right? So I think we could be looking at that as the 8th. Just like Scott pointed out, the 8th coil is truly other than the 7. And the same could be said about this 8th chakra, which it's suggested by the key is also where you truly leave the realm of sequential time. Of course, time changes even in death, right? Even without initiation, it's just, but it's still a governing process, and even in afterlife. But it's to, move into that realm where all is unified, what he describes here in the beginning, right? I think it could be that it's an initiation associated with this high chakra, and we'd have to go back to the 8 planets that are indicated here. But yeah, thanks for your thoughts on that. Anyone else?
Carrie says the sun's beam is God's voice at the resurrection. This is my beloved son.
Say it again. The sun's
beam is God's voice at the resurrection. This is my beloved son.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, the voice and the word is very much connected with this second principle, which unites the deity aspect, the first aspect of divinity, the Father, with the form aspect. Okay, folks, we're way over, but there's nothing like a great image, is there, to just, enliven the imagination. It's so much more powerful than linear text. And then when you have the two together, you have a real feast. Thank you all for participating. Our next webinar is The Secret Doctrine on December 15th. That'll be are we on the 25th or 26th? 25th, I think. 25th episode of The Secret Doctrine. We're right in the middle of it. So those of you who are only participating in this, consider joining us for The Secret Doctrine. There's amazing how much cross-referencing there is between the webinars. And let's see what else. The next Secret Teaching of All Ages will be the first Sunday in January, which I believe is the 5th.
Mm-hmm.
So that's some time, right? We're looking at 5 weeks probably. I think so, yeah. 5 weeks away. So sort of in 2020 will be our next one. So, okay, great. Thank you all so much for participating. It takes a village, as they say, and it's always my greatest joy to host these webinars. So goodbye for now. See you next time.
Goodbye, everybody.